Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, February the 28th, 2024. The big news recently has been the self-immolation of Aaron Bushnell outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. So he was a serving airman, very concerned about what was going on in Gaza, Palestine, and he wanted to do something about it, and he felt that the best thing for him to do, I assume, was to go to the Israeli embassy, and pour some flammable liquid over himself and set himself on fire, and as a result he died. And that is something I want to look at. I do not have his horoscope. I've looked for his date of birth. All I could find was the fact that he was born in 1998. So what do I do? Well, I'm going to look at 1998. I'm going to look at his horoscope anyway, because I want to look at his chart. But, of course, I can only look at Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, perhaps Chiron. I wanted to consider him from a generational perspective, rather than a personal perspective. Because, the Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, these are the generational planets. And so, let's consider, what kind of person he was, from the perspective of the collective. And, I think the collective is perhaps important when we consider people's response to what's going on in Gaza. Clearly, parts of the collective are very, very influenced by it. And it has been, it's been a dramatic influence across the world. So that's one thing I want to look at. But of course, self-immolation is nothing new, and it is a form of extreme protest. I suppose the most famous and dramatic example was the self-immolation of, forgive my pronunciation, I haven't a clue how to pronounce it, of Thích Quảng Đức in June 1963. So he was a Buddhist monk in South Vietnam, and he was protesting against the actions of the government led by President Ngo Dinh Diem, who was systematically discriminating against Buddhists in favour of the Roman Catholics. You couldn't really get any government positions if you weren't a Roman Catholic, and it was across society, and he felt enough was enough, and so he set himself on fire in Saigon and completely burnt himself up, And unfortunately, I think that influenced other people. So another famous person who killed himself with self-immolation was Jan Palach. So in 1968, Czechoslovakia had its Prague Spring, where you suddenly had this sort of liberalization. It wasn't an attempt to split from the Soviet Union. It was just an attempt to free things up, give people freedom of speech, open society up. And unfortunately, the Soviets didn't like it, and they sent the tanks in, I think in August 1968. And then Jan Palach was a student at Charles University in Prague, and in January 1969 he set himself on fire and he died. And so I do want to look at his chart. Jan Palach, we do have a time chart. He's considered a heroic figure. I think other people did follow his lead, unfortunately. Then another self-immolation, which had a massive impact, was the self-immolation of Mohamed Bouazizi at the beginning of 2011. He was a street vendor who was in Tunisia, and his wares constantly got confiscated. He felt he just couldn't do anything. He protested, no one cared, and he felt there was nothing he could do except set himself on fire. And yes, he died, and but that launched the Arab Spring. So self-immolation, as we saw in South Vietnam, in Tunisia, can potentially have a huge impact. There were self-immolations in the United States in response to the Vietnam War. I mean, there are at least 3 people who set themselves on fire and died. I think students who set themselves on fire in the US in response to the Vietnam War. So you could argue that Aaron Bushnell's self-immolation is more in that tradition, not in response to what's going on in your country, unlike Thích Quảng Đức or Jan Palach or Mohamed Bouazizi, but in response to what you perceive your country to be doing. I don't know. We don't know yet. What impact, if any, Aaron Bushnell's self-immolation has done, or will do. But anyway, so there's 4 self-immolations I want to look at in this video. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, February the 28th, 2024. So here is the chart for today. Top right, it's just a random bit of flame, just to emphasize the point that I want to talk about self-immolation. The flame is not from a self-immolation, by the way. I think it's from some weapon firing something, and I just took a bit of flame there, so that's all it is. So today, most of the day, the moon is moving through Libra. So, we still get this moon moving towards the end of Libra. So now that we've got the moon at the end of Libra, we can start thinking in terms of the Via Combusta. So every month, the moon moves through the Via Combusta, which is the part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. So you could say it's not really a big deal. I mean, it happens every month. It lasts for a few days, but, we still need to consider it. So when the moon is in the Via Combusta, the flaming path, though I suppose it's kind of a bit appropriate that I'm talking about the Via Combusta at the same time as I'm talking about self-immolation. Things cannot go to plan. That's what can happen. It's not to say that things won't go wrong. Sorry, it's not. Yeah, that's not quite the same as saying things will go wrong. It's just that things won't go to plan. If we think that things are going to turn out in a particular way, they may turn out like in a different way. So what this means, regardless of your sign, that you need to be careful how you plan things. It's important not to have fixed plans which have no ability to deal with outside change. So whatever your plans you're making for the next few days, try to have a bit of give in them so that they can just deal with something sort of unexpected happening. I think that is going to be important. Now the moon does move into Scorpio very late today if you are in the Americas. Moon moves into Scorpio at 10:09 p.m. New York time. So I don't know if you're on the East Coast of the US. You might notice you're up late. In my experience, Americans seem to go to bed relatively early, at least compared to people in the UK. So it might not be a big deal. So at 10:09 p.m., there might be a change. And of course, if you're on the west coast, on the west coast, that is going to be 7:09 p.m. So yeah, west coast most of the evening, east coast a bit of the evening. Maybe a sudden change. Moon moving into Libra. Perhaps suddenly things will get more emotional, more intense. We put more emphasis on our feelings. It depends what we're doing. I think many of you just won't notice. The moon still remains in the Via Combusta, because the moon is in the Via Combusta right through until the moon is at 15 Scorpio. So that's the moon. And we have got quite a lot of major aspects, or fairly major aspects today. We have got Sun conjunct Mercury. There you are, there's the Sun, it's conjunct Mercury. We have got Mercury conjunct Saturn. There is Mercury and Saturn together. And we have got Sun conjunct Saturn. So we've got this huge conjunction going on. Sun, Mercury, Saturn in Pisces. I think it's a big deal. Saturn is strong. Saturn is really having a big influence. For many of us, we may feel that something is restricting us. There may be a sense of restriction, that we can't completely express ourselves the way we want. You know, Saturn, Mercury, Sun, they're all in Pisces, which is a water sign. So it's kind of emotional, all that emotion there. But a lot of people are trying to really keep hold of their feelings, not feeling that it's quite inappropriate to get those feelings out into the open. So it could be difficult, but on the other hand, it is about structure. Saturn is always about structure. So if something has become chaotic, now might be the time to sort of put it back in its box. Maybe certain people need to be controlled. If someone has been behaving badly, now might be the time to do something about it. If we have been behaving badly, then circumstances out there might appear which start to restrict our freedom of movement. But in general, I think our freedom of movement is going to be restricted, and it's also going to have an impact on communication. Mercury conjunct Saturn, it might be that we can't fully communicate. We just can't. Words just don't come out. We can't say what we want to say. We might feel a sense of frustration. But Mercury conjunct Saturn can work in a different way. It can be about communication, but it can be about harsh communication. We can say things which can be very hurtful. Very often, that's not a particularly good idea. But maybe if someone needs to be put in their place, the right words can be very powerful, can get a big impact. So you really do have to consider the situation. And, when I talked about the full moon over the weekend, I talked about that full moon being about farewells and goodbyes. And today, with Mercury conjunct Saturn, it could be another day when the emphasis is on saying goodbye. Mercury is what we say. Saturn is about finality. It's about setting borders, and so we may finally want to distance ourselves from something or somebody. It just might feel the right thing to do. So we really can't underestimate the importance of this Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjunction. It's just all happening at once. And it's inevitably going to have an impact on how I talk about the 12 signs. And while all this is going on, Mars is semisquare Neptune. And that gives a completely different picture. Mars semisquare Neptune is not really about control. It's about being influenced by unusual things. We can be attracted to unusual things. We might feel that we see something. It's a bit exciting. It's glamorous, but dangerous, and we might kind of want to put our energy there. It will be hard work, and it's probably not the right thing to be doing. Also, though, it could be about frustration. Mars semisquare Neptune. Particularly as there is also this Sun conjunct Saturn, Mercury conjunct Saturn, etc. Mars is how we want to assert ourselves, but Neptune is preventing us from asserting ourselves. It's creating instability. We try to do something, but circumstances just hold us up and prevent things happening. And again, we got the moon in the Via Combusta, which is what I said, you've got to make your plans flexible, because if you have inflexible plans, you're not going to get anywhere. So this could be quite a frustrating influence, the Mars semisquare Neptune. Now, when I do these daily horoscopes, I try to keep it general in terms of timing, but I can't help noticing that if you look at the Sun Mercury Saturn conjunction, the moon is making a sesquiquadrate to this conjunction, and theoretically, when the moon makes a sesquiquadrate, that's the moment where it might happen. So we can actually talk about a period of peak frustration, when things really are not working out at all, when we might see the full impacts of it. So that does depend on where you are. So if you are in London, for example, then, and the UK, Ireland, then the peak moment, the peak hour for this is going to be between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. If you are in New York, the peak time for this is going to be between 11 and 12 in the morning, so just before lunch, the hour after, the hour from 11 a.m. onwards. If you are in Los Angeles, then it's kind of early in the morning, sort of between 8 in the morning and 9 in the morning. If you're in Western Europe, that would be between 5 and 6. Yes, between 5 and 6 in the afternoon. If you are a bit further east, for example, in Ukraine, then that would be between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, that's something that's going to happen much later. I probably, in the middle of the night, so I don't think you perhaps have to worry about it, but sort of, I don't know, off the top of my head, something like, 4 in the morning. I don't know what you're doing at 4 in the morning if you're in Australia, New Zealand, 4, 5, 6 in the morning. But maybe you'll be safely tucked up in bed, and it won't affect you at all. But it's just something to bear in mind. So that's the broad picture. I think overall, I would expect it to be a difficult day. It's only one day, but there is a bit of a build-up of stuff going on, and overall, yes, it does look challenging. So this planetary situation is going to affect different people in different ways, and I'm now going to look at it from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Wednesday, 28th of February, 2024. Aries. So Aries, as usual, lots of things you'd like to do. That's great. And I think from a social perspective, I think you won't be short. Your life won't be short of excitement. So yes, do try to be in contact with as many people as possible. Particularly if these people are on your wavelength. However, consider the possibility that you may not be able to achieve everything that you want to achieve. Mars is your ruler, and today Mars makes a semisquare aspect to Neptune. Something's holding you up. Something is confusing you. It's easy, Aries, to think that the confusion might be from the outside. People telling you things that aren't true, maybe, or you're getting false signals, or just simply things not working out for one reason or another. Just doesn't happen. And you may want to blame other people for what's going on, but I think that fundamentally the issue is within yourself. I must emphasize that I'm not talking about anything pathological. This Mars semisquare Neptune is a passing aspect. It doesn't last long, but you're possibly misinterpreting things. You get some information from the outside world, you respond to this information, you want to react to the information, but you're just getting it wrong. You're perhaps not taking the time to properly read the signals, and as a result, you're taking actions that, in the end, don't really work out. And so I think, Aries, it's just very important to take things sort of one step at a time, and to always consider what you feel about something. I said you might be sure that you're being objective, but I don't think you are being objective. I think at every step of the way, your own feelings are making things more difficult. Now, at the same time, if you were to listen to other people, you were to get feedback from other people, which, there is an inclination on your part to do that. I'm not convinced that would be helpful either. Other people are not going to be very constructive. They might offer you advice, but there's a good chance that advice is worse than useless. So Aries, you can see that it is actually really a day when maybe you should put some of your ideas and plans on hold, because it's difficult to see a successful conclusion. Or things might just take much longer than you expected. So long that you might feel that something is just a complete failure. So what do? Well, yeah, you either take it slowly, or you just focus on something else. You listen to other people. Yeah, you can by all means listen to other people. That is a good thing to do today. Listen. Try to understand what people want. Try to understand other people's flaws, because yes, we all have flaws. We all have areas of our life which we don't fully get. But try to, this time, try to understand what causes other people to make mistakes. Try to just to listen, but don't draw any conclusions. It would be a bad idea to reach conclusions, because there's a good chance that your conclusions are just going to be wrong. I'd love to have been more positive today, but really, that's all I can say. Taurus. There are times today when you are going to be feeling, I would have said, pretty frustrated. It's just going to be hard to get anything done. But you're not alone. It is going to be a difficult day for everyone. Though perhaps in your case, things might not be quite so bad. Reason being that although Mars is making a semisquare to Neptune, it's still making a square to Jupiter. I mean, that square between Mars and Jupiter is still operational. And that does mean, Taurus, that you're still optimistic. However frustrated you might feel, however difficult it might be to get things done, there is a sort of fundamental sense of optimism there, that if you do the right thing, you can actually see progress, that you can get other people to take you seriously, because you have to think about not just yourself in the here and now, but yourself like tomorrow or next week. So how are you progressing yourself and your agenda? And I think you actually can take action to progress your agenda. And your dynamism can pay off, but you do have to take it. You do have to take it slowly. You cannot expect fast results. Probably the best thing to do today, Taurus, is to engage in some sort of quiet preparation. It may not be much fun, maybe a bit boring, but that's probably the right way to handle today's energy, because it is a difficult day, and it's a difficult day. I really must stress this: it is a difficult day for everyone. So. Yeah, take it easy, and don't try too hard to please other people. Don't try too hard to adjust yourself to other people's reality, because if you were to do that, it would be a constant process of adjustment. You're not going to get yourself into a situation where you're able to make everyone happy. It's just not possible. So really, Taurus, just work on the details, but details that are important for you, not details that are important for other people. If you are socializing today, and that's what many Taurians are perhaps going to want to do. Yes, there will be people to interact with, but it may not be much fun. You think you're meeting people because you want to enjoy yourself, but in the end, it all becomes very serious, because people are serious. And you may find yourself having to deal with another person's problems, for example, and it'll occur to you that people are just not really expressing themselves, and it might feel like hard work, but I suppose you can do something useful. Maybe your role here is to ground other people, just to sort of explain the situation to them. Use your Taurian sense of, your Taurean down to earth demeanor. Just put that on and bring everyone else down to earth with you. And perhaps certain emotions need to be dealt with, need to be addressed. But yeah, it's hard work. But I mean, I think you can do something. I think you can do something useful if you really make the effort. Gemini, it is a difficult day. It is a difficult day for everyone. So you must not feel that you're being singled out. In fact, I'm wondering. Well, I'm going through the 12 signs today. I'm wondering if there's any point, because I think today of all days, I think all the 12 signs are going to have pretty similar experiences, because I think the astrology today is tough. But for you, for example, there is an exact conjunction between Mercury and Saturn. Also, Mercury, your ruler, is conjunct the Sun. So that means that Mercury is combust. It's right dead close to the Sun. Though I need to qualify this, because in astrology there is something called the Cazimi conjunction with the Sun. In astrology, conjunctions to the Sun are seen to be unfortunate unless they're really close. So you could argue that Mercury, your ruler, is Cazimi conjunction to the Sun. So there may actually be a time during the day when things appear to be difficult, but suddenly you're on the right wavelength with everything. Suddenly you're there, and you completely understand what's going on. It may be a fleeting moment, but look out for it. Just suddenly the clouds clear. You know what you're doing. So when that happens, really take advantage of that moment. You see, Gemini, it's not so bad. There is certainly something positive to be said, and that is, all about how you make a mark on the world. You do have a chance to make a mark on the world, but in order to make a mark on the world, you're going to need a lot of self-discipline. It's not about how you feel. So just because you're feeling negative, it doesn't mean you can't do things. Mercury is conjunct Saturn. There may be a sense that there's no point. You're wasting your time, but you need to cut through that and get that moment where all is clear, and you and the world are on the same wavelength, and then I think you could achieve something really great. But you've got to be there. You've got to just go through a lot of flack, a lot of difficulties, a lot of negativity, also a lot of negativity from other people. You're just going to have to go through it, and then I think you can start making real progress. And I should also say that it's not really a typical Gemini day. You're going to be perhaps more serious than usual. And this is particularly the case if you have a position of authority, any authority. So if you have a position of authority, Gemini, then I think you may have no choice but to use that position of authority. You may have to be very clear about what is right and wrong. You might have to, I don't think it's an American phrase. You might have to read the Rat Act to someone, because is that more of a British phrase, reading the Rat Act to someone? I don't know. Just telling someone they're out of order. So that's something you might have to do if you're in a position of authority. Don't be afraid of doing it. It is appropriate. It's almost expected of you, with this Sun, Saturn, Mercury conjunction. But one warning, Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn. So there are different ways in which that can manifest. So remember, Mercury is your ruler. And Mercury conjunct Saturn can be quite harsh. You can say things that can cause a lot of upset. Now, it's possible that that's what you intend. It's possible that that's the right thing to do. But just be careful about just saying the first thing that comes into your head, because, it could cause a lot of pain. So don't be harsh unless it's really necessary. Cancer, as you perhaps have gathered from what I'm saying, it's going to be a difficult day for many people because of this Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjunction. As far as you're concerned, I think that you probably take the view that the best way to get through the day is to keep yourself to yourself. Now, I talked about this yesterday, and I was suggesting, well, yes, but you can't just keep yourself to yourself. There are obligations out there that you're supposed to deal with, you're supposed to address. I think these obligations still exist, but because the moon, your ruler, is in Libra, spending a little bit of time, in your own space may not be such a bad thing, because you need to balance out. There is a lot going on. Certain people are a bit of a mess. You can't be with them all the time. So do ground yourself. And grounding may be difficult. It just may feel that everything's up in the air. And it's not your fault. It's just what's going on. And so giving yourself an anchor is really going to matter. So whatever you're doing today, however busy your life is, just make sure that you've always sort of worked out your escape route. It's like in an aeroplane, isn't it? You should always know how to get out of that plane if it crashes in it crashes into the sea. You're supposed to listen to at the beginning of the flight when a flight attendant tells you what to do if there's a crash, or if you're in a tall building. What is the escape route? So perhaps, Cancer, whatever you're doing, you should always ask yourself, what is the escape route? And just make sure in your mind that you've got that escape route mapped out. You might not need that escape route, and I'm not saying there's going to be a disaster. I'm just saying you're going to need that escape route if just things get a bit too heavy, you feel uncertain, just so that you know that you can just get out, restore your balance before returning to the fray. Now, you may find in terms of relationships, but that some of the people you have to deal with are actually in pretty bad shape, just not themselves. It's because there's a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn. Saturn in the Cancerian chart rules Capricorn, your opposite sign. And Saturn is conjunct the Sun, so Saturn is combust. So maybe partners, other people close to you, there's something really bothering them, and it's perhaps up to you to kind of find out what it is, but you don't need to get too close, because you've got a limited amount of energy. You haven't got all the energy in the world. So listen, but you don't have to become part of someone else's problem. So one other thing I should say, Cancer, is that the moon is the moon is in the Via Combusta, the flaming path. It's not the really difficult part of the Via Combusta when the moon goes into Scorpio, but still it is a stage where plans could have to be changed at the last minute. Now this applies to everyone. It's not just you. But because the moon is your ruler, you do have to make a special effort to consider how plans, schedules could be messed up. And if possible, you should create a plan B. And perhaps that goes back to what I was saying about an escape route. Escape routes are important just in case something goes wrong. Cancer is a very security-orientated sign. And actually, Cancerians do really know how to look after themselves. Leo, on one hand, you feel that you've got things to say. That's nice. But the question is anyone going to listen? It seems to me, Leo, that if you have got anything to say that's useful, you probably will have already said it. But saying anything more is probably not helpful. In fact, by saying important things now, okay, look, some things are really important and they have to be said, but making in general big statements could at best be a waste of time. Could at worst be a confusing element. People maybe have finally understood what's going on, and then you add some extra detail, and the extra detail you add doesn't help at all. It just makes matters worse, and it makes matters, could make matters really confusing. And matters are not going to be helped by the fact that the sun, which is your ruler, is conjunct Saturn. It's the way it is. I mean, it just can't be helped. The sun is conjunct Saturn. Saturn could be a restricting influence. You may not be able to do what you want to do today. It will be easy, I think, to blame other people because, Saturn rules your opposite sign of Aquarius. So Sun conjunct Saturn, you can't do what you want to do, and you feel just frustrated, and you perhaps want to blame someone. That is possible. On the other hand, do consider your influence on other people. You could be quite a difficult influence. You could burn people out. You could be hard work. So turn down the volume a bit. Turn down the temperature. Maybe you're being too emotional. Now, Leo is not, all things being equal, the most emotional of the 12 signs. But today your emotions seem to be at quite a high volume, or the Leo emotional oven is turned up to maximum, as high as it will go. So do consider the possibility that you might sort of burn someone else out. Yet the Sun is making a conjunction to Saturn. So Saturn represents, as I've said, someone else, and the Sun represents you. So it is about relationships, that Sun conjunct Saturn. And yes, I think there is a way to look at it which is negative, which I've just gone over, but there is also a positive approach. It does suggest that you and someone else are coming together. It could be coming together for a difficult, conflicting situation, but it's possible that you're coming together in a positive sense, that you and someone else actually understand each other. You perhaps both have the same view of the world and its problems. Maybe you actually can relate to each other. This person, if it's going to work, you need to respect this person. In some respects, this person may be wiser than you, more experienced than you. And if you're prepared to listen to this person, consider the possibility that they're right and you're wrong, then maybe this could be a very useful relationship. I mean, mutual respect is going to be important, but it's particularly important that you respect this person. So, like, who is it? It might be someone who is older than you, if not in years, certainly in terms of, well, not certainly, but perhaps in terms of knowledge and experience. So, consider who that person might be, and consider how you and this person can form a constructive relationship. Or if you're already in a relationship with this person, maybe how you can make the most of each other's company. Virgo. So Virgo, when I was talking to Gemini, I was making a big thing of a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. So Mercury is your ruler, and so we need to look at Mercury to see what's going on in your life, what's happening today. And Mercury it's conjunct the Sun, and it's conjunct Saturn. So on the face of it, Mercury is in quite a difficult position. I mean, Mercury conjunct Sun is about being combust. You lose your objectivity. There's something big out there that it's overwhelming. So overwhelming that you don't really know what's going on. And at the same time, Mercury is moving towards a conjunction of, it's on a conjunction of Saturn, and that can be quite debilitating. It can make you feel pretty negative about the world, and it possibly may not helped by other people, because this conjunction between Sun, Mercury, and Saturn is happening in Pisces. It's your opposite sign. So this means that relationships have to be treated with enormous caution. It's probably the case that relationships can't be avoided, but you might find that certain people really bring you down. They really restrict your freedom of action. You may feel that it's just better to be on your own than having to deal with this kind of restriction. So that is a negative way of looking at it. But yeah, as I was saying to Gemini, Sun makes this conjunction with Mercury today, and there is this idea in astrology of a Cazimi conjunction with the Sun. So you've got general combustion when the Sun moves very close to a planet, which is seen to be negative. But when it's like exactly conjunct, I think one source, I think it was William Lilly in the 17th century, said within 17 arc minutes. When it's exactly conjunct, it's known to be Cazimi. So when it is Cazimi, the Sun and Mercury are on the same wavelength. And when Mercury is on the same wavelength as the Sun, Mercury can't be burnt anymore. And so there may be a moment of real strength, a glancing moment, but a moment that is definitely there. So when that happens, if that happens, you need to be able to, I think you'll just see things. It will be clear. and what you thought was an obstacle, what you thought was just preventing you from taking action, will actually be a major plus in your life. And so there will be a moment where you have a lot of freedom, a lot of strength, and the clouds will clear, and yes, you can really achieve some major things. And it may be a very good time in terms of relationships. So perhaps when dealing with other people, you have to persevere. Just because you're getting a negative response from them, just because you're getting criticism, just keep going. And then suddenly there may be a moment where you and someone else are exactly on the same wavelength, and that could be a very important moment. But I should also point out that Mercury, your ruler, is conjunct Saturn, and there are a number of ways of looking at it. One way of looking at Mercury conjunct Saturn is to say, well, Saturn is a depressing influence. Mercury conjunct Saturn means, well, maybe Virgos are going to have a sort of a fairly negative view of the world. But when I say talk about a depressing influence, I must emphasize I'm not talking about anything pathological. And indeed, if you feel a bit depressed today, you can say to yourself, well, that's just because Mercury is conjunct Saturn or Sun is conjunct Saturn. It will pass. This is maximum. This is at a maximum. These planets will start to separate. But Mercury conjunct Saturn is also about the way you communicate. Now, it may be that you feel you can't communicate because you're dealing with, difficult issues, and it's all overwhelming, and there's just nothing. Your words just don't come out. But it might mean that you can be quite vicious in the way you communicate. Mercury conjunct Saturn can be verbally really destructive. And so if you start going at someone with your words, you can rip them to shreds, and you'll know their weaknesses. And so you have to consider the wisdom of that. Now, in certain situations, of course, it is necessary to be critical. Just as you might receive criticism today, you can dole out the criticism as well, and you can really dole it out. So do consider the situation. Is it really the right thing to tear someone to shreds with your words? You might even do it without even thinking. You might notice a few details, notice some stuff, and you think, oh well, I'm going to talk about it. It's obvious need to mention that, and you do mention it, and it really starts to escalate. I think you need to be careful what you say, Virgo, because the wrong words could cause a lot of damage. Libra, the moon is moving through the last degrees of your star sign. It's good that the moon is moving through your star sign. It gives you a good sense of what is going on. In fact, the moon is not just moving through your star sign. It does conjunct at a certain stage the fixed star Spica, and Spica is actually quite a fortunate influence. You are in some respects, if you're dealing with things that if you're dealing with things that you really understand, that you're really comfortable with, then I think things really will start to go your way. But it has to be very focused on your domain, something you're good at. If you stray away from that, then things could start to become difficult. I think that many Librans actually may take the view that it is better to observe, because you can see that it is a complicated day, not for you, but for other people, and you might be thinking, well, is it really worth the effort? Do you want to get involved? And I suppose that is up to you. If there's also the question of Venus, your ruling planet. Venus is in Aquarius from a Libran perspective. That's quite a good place for Venus to be in. You can be quietly creative. You can do your own thing without having to worry too much about what's going on in the outside world. So in that sense, actually, Libra, I'm being negative in places for a lot of the 12 signs. I don't feel particularly negative about what's happening in your life. I think you can just quietly do your own thing, and that might be the best approach, to just stay out of other people's way. It kind of might not be the right thing to do from a sort of karmic point of view, but you might reason that you can deal with your karma at a later stage, but it's not for me to tell you about your karma. I mean, that's not my role. I don't even like to use the word karma. It's a bit presumptuous to use the word karma. I say that because yesterday we had the moon conjunct the south node in Libra. That was just a bit too Libran. The standard Libran approach of just fitting in, not rocking the boat, may not be fully appropriate. We've still got a conjunction between the moon conjunct the south node, but nonetheless, it may be that the best approach is to put yourself first, and I think you do have to be a little careful in terms of relationships. Strictly speaking, relationships are the way to go. You should be paying attention to someone. You should be looking at. There might be someone you need to. Need to pay attention to their interests. You might listen. You might need to listen to them. Try to sort of do a bit of sort of verbal healing if you can. But the fact is that Mars is ruler of Aries, your opposite sign. The fact is that Mars is semi-square Neptune, and Neptune is a confusing influence. So if Mars is semi-square Neptune, some of the people around you are just probably more trouble than they're worth. They're just confusing. If you get too close to them, they're going to make your life complicated. I suppose you could give it a try. If someone is there and they want to be with you, yeah, sure, try it. See how it works. It may be fine, but as soon as that person starts being flaky, starts creating complications, if they become flaky, if they create complications, as soon as that happens, then just get out. You probably don't need the bother. Scorpio. It is a rather complicated day, Scorpio. Not just for you, but for really most people. As far as you're concerned, the complication, it relates to the fact that Mars, which is your ruler, is semi-square Neptune. Neptune can be quite a confusing influence. There are things you want to do. There are things you want to put your energy into certain things, but it doesn't feel that things are really working out. You might start putting your energy into the wrong things. You might get distracted or deceived, and start moving a long way down a particular road, and then start realizing that the direction you're moving in is the wrong direction, and you've misunderstood the signals. Easy to blame other people, but I don't think it's something you should be doing. I think you need to take full responsibility for it. Um, but there is another side to the day. It's a day when Saturn, the planet of responsibility, is strong. I won't say strong. I will say it's prominent. It's prominent because the Sun is making a conjunction to Saturn. Mercury is making a conjunction to Saturn. Saturn is a planet of authority. And from your perspective, I think that you are in a position to assert your authority. Again, I think everyone should be considering, regardless of their sign, should be considering their relationship to authority. But your relationship to authority today may be quite strong. And if you really start to assert yourself, particularly if you are in a position of authority, then actually I think you can do it in really quite a powerful way. Once you've decided that you want things to happen according to a particular plan, once you start telling people about your plan and the way things should be, I think you will have incredible credibility. People will just say, "Yeah, Scorpio seems to know what they're doing," and it may feel when people deal with Scorpios that Scorpios may feel that that their power is underwritten by another power. There's a power behind the power, and so when people deal with Scorpios, they're thinking, "Oh, I'm not just dealing with Scorpio; I'm dealing with something else that Scorpio is a representative of." Now, that would be especially the case if your power came from an external organization. I don't know, for example, if you're a police officer or a government official, then it would be very clear. So if you're a Scorpio government official, police officer, I don't know, you get your authority from someone else, then in that case, you are really going to be strong today. But even if you don't have that kind of backing, people will still feel that you do have that kind of backing. Especially if you talk about facts. If you start quoting the law to people, if you say, "Well, this is how it works in this society," and you give a few laws, and people will say, "Yeah, Scorpio, we're not going to argue with Scorpio." But I remind you about what I said at the beginning of this piece on Scorpio. Mars is semisquare Neptune. There is the danger of being confused. So if you're in a position of authority and you start wanting to wield that authority, make absolutely sure you've got it right. There is a danger that you've got something wrong. Yeah, you might be able to get your way, but just because you get your way doesn't mean you're right. So do bear that in mind. There's a lot of responsibility there, Scorpio. But I think if you're true to yourself and you don't allow yourself to be sidetracked and you make a special effort to be objective, then I think you can have a powerful day, and I think you can really get people to sit up and take notice of you. Sagittarius. Okay, I've sort of very much emphasized today that there is this conjunction between Sun, Mercury, and Saturn, and it's in Pisces. So from a Sagittarian perspective, Pisces is the sign, at the bottom of your chart. It's a mutable sign. Sagittarius is a mutable sign. It very much represents the foundations of who you are. How you define your security. And I think that with this Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjunction, I do think that security issues are going to be very important. And I think that there is a positive side to that. I think today, Sagittarius, you're going to get a real sense of what matters. It's all very well thinking about, what is exciting, what is stimulating, new horizons, all of that kind of stuff. People talk about, particularly with reference to Sagittarius. But this whole thing has to be grounded. And today, Sagittarius, I do think that you have a real opportunity to ground everything. If you've been working on something, now's the time to sort of tie it all down. Make sure that recent gains are secured. You may not get much support. It may be that people don't really understand what you're doing. They question what you're doing. But you're doing the right thing. I mean, it's an intuitive thing. Sagittarius are very intuitive. You know that it's right, and I think that it might be in many cases worth your while putting a lot of effort into your home and your family relationships and that kind of area, because there's a lot you can sort out, but it will be in quite a gritty, sort of hard-working kind of way. Now, I do understand that there are going to be other things going on. For example, the moon is in Libra. From a Sagittarian perspective, Libra is often a sign connected with, with socializing with friends. You may want to put some effort into socializing, meeting up with friends, but I wouldn't put too much effort into it, because by and large, the people like friends, particularly friends. I mean, not because friends are people, but there's no tie like colleagues at work. It's not like that. It's just friends, socializing for the sake of socializing. It could, I think it's just don't give too much time to other people if it's not a defined relationship. Your family, by all means, give time to your family. If you're working, your workmates, by all means, give time to your workmates. Where there's a real, or your employers, your employee, whatever. That's okay. But just people in general, they could waste a lot of your time. Whether it's face-to-face talking, whether it's phone calls, they could waste your time, and basically you'll achieve nothing. But still, it might make you feel comfortable. But you just do need to put some limits on it. Now, one aspect that I do need to talk about is a conjunction between the Mercury and Saturn. So, from a Sagittarian perspective, Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, which is your opposite sign. And so if Mercury is conjunct Saturn, then it may be the case that someone close to you is a little bit under the weather, or they're finding it difficult to express themselves, or there may be something bothering them. And it may not be immediately apparent to you. So it might be a good idea to give the important people in your life some of your time. I'm not talking about vague friends who you want to talk to on the phone or WhatsApp or whatever. I'm just talking about people who are important to you. Just listen to what they're saying. Give them space. I think that really does matter. Just listen to what they've got to say. It may take a bit of time for them to express themselves, perhaps because some people just don't want to express themselves. And maybe you can understand what someone is saying without having to listen to their precise words. Their body language might say it all. But yeah, do give that person, whoever it might be, the time and the space they require. Also, don't be offended if someone uses strong words against you. It might happen. It may be that they don't mean it, in which case you can just move on. It's just nothing. You don't even have to say anything back. If someone wants to say something that seems to hurt you, maybe they just don't mean it. There's no point in making a big deal about it. It may be that they're making a genuine criticism. So if someone attacks you verbally, don't just respond in a sort of defensive way. Consider what's being said to you. Because, it may be that you're being told something that's genuinely important. Maybe you're being told it in a way that is a bit tactless. But you're a Sagittarius. You understand tactlessness. Tactlessness is part of the human condition. If you're a Sagittarius, so don't be offended by what people say. And so in general, in terms of people, work out who's important, who's not important. Some people are just irrelevant. Work out who the important people are, and once you've done that, give them your time. You can help them. You must also be tolerant. If someone treats you at least in a verbal sense, in a way that feels disrespectful, don't worry about it. It's just Mercury conjunct Saturn. Things happen like this when Mercury is conjunct Saturn. Capricorn. Saturn is your ruler, Capricorn, and Saturn is making a conjunction to the Sun, and it is making a conjunction to Mercury. So this requires attention. In one sense, Saturn is it is really close to the Sun. It's combust. It's quasi-combust. So combustions to the Sun in astrology can be difficult because there is an argument that the Sun is the most difficult planet, is in some ways is the most malefic planet of them all. That's an idea we sort of get more from sort of Vedic astrology, but the Sun can be very malefic when it gets too close to a planet. So like right now, Sun conjunct Saturn, you might feel that you're sort of a bit burnt out. I mean, that is one way of seeing it. But when I was talking to Gemini and Virgo about having a planet close to the Sun, there is another way of looking at it, and it's this Cazimi conjunction. When the Sun is really close to the Sun, it's Cazimi. It's like that the Sun and the Saturn are suddenly on the same wavelength. And I think that today there may be a feeling that you are moving onto the same wavelength of something. It may be just be a feeling that you've got sort of difficulties, restrictions, and it's not a happy situation, and you keep trudging on, trudging through the mud, and then suddenly things start to clear, things start to clarify. In your terms of your understanding of the world in which you're living, your understanding of everything around you, it all becomes clear, and suddenly you're in an incredibly strong position, a position where you can do no wrong, because you have complete understanding. Okay, we can never have complete understanding, but you will suddenly be doing the right thing, going in the right direction, saying the right things, everything will be right. Now, this moment may not last very long, but you need to draw strength from it. So when you've hit your groove, and I think today you can hit your groove, but you've got to keep moving. You can't just start the day thinking, "Oh, this looks a bit difficult," or be put off by the first hurdle. But keep going. When you've hit your groove, you can really you can really make sense, and you can start to have a powerful impact on other people. Because the things you say will make sense, and I think you may start to realize that something has to be done. You will see the world as it is, and you will see what the problems are, and then you will be in a position to take action. And don't be surprised if you come up with quite a sort of radical solution, something almost revolutionary. I know that Capricorns have a reputation for being quite staid and being sensible, but you may actually come up with an idea that is at first sight seems completely unsensible, but it may not be as crazy as it sounds, because I think that basically what's happened is that you recognise, Capricorn, that a change is required, and that you have this moment of clarity today. You see what is required, and then you are in a position to take action, and I think other people are going to notice, and it may be a situation where, in order to create stability, you need to have a mini revolution, and maybe Capricorn is just the person to bring this revolution about. Aquarius. So, like Capricorn, Saturn is your ruling planet, and that means, Aquarius, that you've got Sun. The Sun is exactly conjunct. Your ruling planet. Sun conjunct Saturn. And so I mentioned when I was talking to Capricorn, I was saying that this could actually be very fortunate, because when the Sun is exactly conjunct Saturn, you are on the same wavelength for something. Something that you thought was a problem is actually something you completely understand. And I do understand that Aquarians are often not particularly emotional, but I think the emotional dimension is something you're going to be familiar with. You may not want to articulate your feelings. Aquarians often don't like to be too open about their feelings, but your feelings deep down, they are finely tuned. And I think with this Sun conjunct Saturn, it's like you can bring your feelings down to earth and just have a feeling of just understanding what needs to be done, and also just understanding perhaps the material details of the world around you. And I'm thinking particularly of money. I don't know what your relationship with money has been like recently, but in theory, for Aquarius, money should be important today, because there's a lot of planets in Pisces, and Pisces is a sign following Aquarius, so always a sign following your own sign is a sign that is sort of money, finance orientated. So if you do spend time on money, if you are focusing on money today, you might start being quite negative about money, been thinking about all the things that perhaps are wrong with your financial situation, all the things you'd like to be better, perhaps ruminating about past mistakes. But if you really give it some thought, then I think the Cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Saturn might start to kick in, and you just suddenly get a sense of what you need to do, and perhaps who you need to talk to, and alongside that, there may be a little piece of financial luck or some piece of news that suggests that things are actually going in the right direction. Now, the Sun conjunct Saturn can also have an impact on relationships, because Saturn rules Aquarius and the Sun rules Leo, which is your opposite sign. So, whoever that relationship is with, the Sun and Saturn are conjunct. Now, it all depends on the relationship. If you are with someone and you are exactly on the same wavelength as them, remembering Sun conjunct Saturn, Cazimi, it's all about wavelength. As you get close, there are problems, disharmony, but as you get really close, it all comes together, and there can be real closeness between you and someone else, and suddenly you can't hurt each other, you can't restrict each other, and it is very harmonious. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is Saturn is combust. Saturn is being burnt out by another person. On the other hand, Saturn is restricting this person. So one person is burning you, one person is burning the other, and the other person is restricting, and it's a relationship that is just absolutely going nowhere. It is awful. At least today, it's awful. So, obviously, if you're involved in an awful relationship, or you're getting involved with someone who is awful, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just trying to look at all possibilities. So if there's someone out there who is awful, then really stay out of their way with Sun conjunct Saturn. But hopefully there's someone close to you who you are on the same wavelength of them. In which case, get as close to them as possible, because the closer you are, the more harmonious it will be. But you've got to use your judgment there. When considering the various people around you. Pisces, it is a busy day, and it's busy in terms of your star sign. There is a lot of action in Pisces, your star sign. As I said, there is Sun and Mercury and Saturn all together, big conjunction in your star sign. I think this conjunction overall is probably going to put you in quite a strong position. It's true that this Sun-Mercury-Saturn conjunction is difficult, and that a lot of the other signs have been labouring or are labouring under its influence. But for you, it's you. Saturn has been moving through your star sign for about a year, just under a year. I think Saturn moved into Pisces in March of last year. And so with Saturn moving through your star sign, I think many of you have been feeling, a growing sense of authority, a sense that you really know what you're doing. A lot of the uncertainties of the more distant past have perhaps started to resolve themselves, and you know what you should be doing. Okay, you might not be doing what you're supposed to be doing, but at least you know what you're supposed to be doing. And with the Sun and Mercury making a conjunction to Saturn, you may be the person with the strength, the person in control, and your decisions, your actions can actually have a big influence on the world out there, and you can just give the impression of just being and being an authority, and I don't think it's going to be questioned. Now, you might have your doubts. I mean, after all, I mean, the moon is moving through Libra. Libra and Pisces are signs which have nothing to do with each other, really. Pisces is a water sign. Moon's in Libra, which is an air sign. Pisces is a negative sign. Libra is a positive sign. So you may not feel that you really want to engage with the moon in Libra. You're aware, you're kind of aware of what other people are like, what the world is like, and the world does seem as if it's sort of hard work. But I think you're perhaps not quite as intense as you think you are. Now, you might think that things are very serious. That everything is intense, particularly at an emotional level. But maybe you're exaggerating. Maybe Pisces, you can just express quiet authority, and it should be quiet authority. But still, you do have to be careful what you say, because there is this conjunction between Mercury and Saturn in your star sign. So the thing about Mercury is that Mercury rules Virgo, your opposite sign. And so Mercury could represent another person. Someone you get in touch with over the course of the day. And Mercury is under a bit of pressure because Mercury is conjunct Saturn. So there's someone who is attracted to you, who's in your sphere of influence, who is really feeling a bit overwhelmed by it all. And matters may not be made any better if you say the wrong thing, because Mercury conjunct Saturn in Pisces could be about you saying something that is hurtful. A lot of signs are in a position where they might say things that are hurtful. It's not just you, but you're capable of saying hurtful things today. Hurtful things to someone who is feeling a bit vulnerable. And so do consider your audience, what you're saying. If you feel you've got to say something, if you feel you've got to use strong words, it's just very important that you do consider who you're talking to. And you also consider what words you're using. The words you use need to be very carefully chosen, especially with Mercury conjunct Saturn in Pisces. Give it some thought, because one thoughtless word could cause a lot of hurt, a lot of damage. Having said all that, I do think Pisces, overall today, I think you're in a strong position. And arguably, when you look at all the 12 signs, you're probably one of the signs that is actually in the strongest position. Now it's time to look at things in a different way, to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was preponderance of the small. It's number 62. The advice here is not to take on too much. If we take on too much, we're not really going to achieve much. There's a limit, because there is a limit to what we can achieve. We still feel that we have to take action, but I think there's a danger here that we take action too early, and maybe this relates also to the fact that there is this very Saturnine influence today. I've just talked about having the Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjunction today. It dominates the day. when you've got Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjunction, it 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 really brings things down. It weighs things down. We can't accomplish much, and so this perhaps reflects the astrology. But I must emphasize the astrology and the I Ching are completely independent. So don't take on too much, and don't go too early. Don't fly too early. Preponderance of the small. I think we've got the symbolism of a bird, a young bird, because the first line moves. Is trying to take flight, but don't want to take flight too early, because if you take flight too early, you make yourself vulnerable. So early action should be avoided. You need to understand more. You almost need to mature more, at least as the day progresses. Then, at a certain stage, the second line moves. And that means that we can start slowly to get things off the ground. It's slow. We must not overdo it. We must certainly exercise restraint. But perhaps we can start to make slow progress, and we should not be trying to achieve too much. Then the fourth line moves. The fourth line from the top moves, and I think that the process of taking action continues, and we may actually get ourselves into a situation where we are taking a risk, where it is a bit dangerous as we try to move forward with our plans. But I think it's going to be okay if we are really careful. So caution and patience is the order of the day, at least to begin with. Now, this hexagram 62, does move. It moves to hexagram number 11, which is peace. It's actually one of the best hexagrams in the book, because you can see that everything is in order. Got 3 broken lines on the top, 3 unbroken lines at the bottom. It's not a top-heavy hexagram. The top 3 lines represent heaven. And perhaps the idea that we can get in touch with that celestial harmony. And likewise with the broken lines at the bottom, the unbroken lines at the bottom suggest in some ways heaven is coming down to earth. But it's also about flow, things moving. Greg Winkup, in his translation, he doesn't call this hexagram peace, he calls it flowing. So after all of the issues with preponderance of the small, things taking a long time to develop, we're needing patience, not trying to accomplish too much, being really, really careful, when suddenly there is a moment where things start to move again, and we can find a measure of peace and harmony. So don't be put off if at the beginning of the day things really aren't moving. You just need to persevere, but be patient, and then there will come a stage when things do start moving, and when there is a sense of peace and harmony. So a day that possibly starts badly, but I think ends quite well. So now I've got to consider the issue of self-immolation. And the astrology of self-immolation. I'm not saying it is an astrology of self-immolation. And I wanted to start off by looking at the horoscope for the time, for that moment on in 1963, when this Buddhist monk, Thích Quảng Đức, set himself on fire in the middle of Saigon on June 11th, 1963. It's made famous. There is a picture of this monk engulfed in flames. You've probably seen it, and it was incredibly dramatic. John F. Kennedy was shown a picture, and he was sort of completely sort of freaked out. It was a real sort of moment, and so this is the chart. I do not have the chart of the monk himself. So what happened was he got out of the car. He was surrounded by other monks. Then they poured a can of gasoline over him. Then he himself had a book of matches and set himself on fire. So I think Mercury gets my attention there. Mercury is you can see that Mercury is conjunct Algol. So Algol is the head of the demon. It's the Gorgon's head. I think that with the Gorgon's head, when you look at the Gorgon, you get turned to stone. It's a transfixing experience, totally transfixing. You look at the Gorgon, and that's it. It's a moment of complete horror, and this is clearly what happened. Mercury is about communication. This picture went around the world. Said Kennedy saw it. It's still, if you look at that picture, it's which you can see. I'm not going to put it on this video, but you can find it. It is a horrific picture. Just this man sitting I think he was sitting down, engulfed in flames, just completely silent, completely still, and I think he was just incinerated, just turned into, he completely charred, and in the end, afterwards his charred body just sort of fell over. And that's Mercury conjunct Algol. And Mercury was also aspecting the Sun-Moon midpoint. I think probably that would be by semisquare. So when you've got Mercury conjunct the Sun-Moon midpoint, that tells you, what is the most important planet in the chart. Not what is the most important planet in the chart, but it just gives you a feel about, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's a chart that has, in its own way, real prominence. So Mercury on its own on the Sun-Moon midpoint, it's just about communication. There's nothing bad about it, but it's Mercury conjunct Algol on the Sun-Moon midpoint. And at the same time, Venus was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, I believe. Is that right? Venus was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and it was on the Saturn-Uranus midpoint. In fact, you can see Venus. In fact, Venus is pretty close to Algol. You've got the Mercury-Venus conjunction. So the midpoint of Saturn and Uranus, there you can see. In fact, it kind of makes sense that there was a Mars-Uranus conjunction, opposition Saturn, and Venus was right on it. I can look at that in terms of the 90-degree dial, which sort of can make it a bit easier to see these midpoints. So this is, let's see, where's Venus gone? Okay, so if we move this dial to Venus, you see there's Venus, and you can see that Venus is on the Mars, there's that Mars-Uranus conjunction, and Saturn is right on that Venus. So I suppose that might reflect the aesthetics of the event, how the world sees it, and it is very dramatic. But Venus might also be a trigger. So what transiting Venus is doing, you've got Mars and Saturn, you've got the Mars-Saturn midpoint. You've got a Mars-Uranus conjunction coming in, and then so Venus sort of brings together Saturn with the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So Venus perhaps doesn't really matter what Venus is. It's just a trigger that brings together Saturn and Mars-Uranus. So Saturn is the reality of the event, and Mars-Uranus is about someone doing something dramatic and horrific. And so that's the Mars-Uranus, this sudden event. And there was big speculation about this event. The monks had told people that they were going to do something, that there was going to be a happening, there was going to be something was going to go on, and so people went to some people went to this place. There were forewarning. But clearly the monks had wanted to create a big impression, and certainly that's what they did. And I suppose with this big impression, people remembered it, and so it unfortunately may have been an example to other people. And so at the end of the decade, in 1968, the Russian tanks went into Czechoslovakia in was it end of August 1968, when the Prague Spring came to an end, and there was a student by the name of Jan Palach who was born on August the 11th, 1948, at 3:27 a.m. in Prague, and Jan Palach was clearly obviously really upset about it. A lot of, you imagine I suppose if you're a young person in Czechoslovakia, everything looked great with the Prague Spring. You had this, you had new freedoms. You could say what you like. You just had freedoms that you'd never had before, and it all must have seemed great. And then the Russian tanks came in, and everything was back to normal, and and so you can understand that might have been a situation, like with the monks. The monks felt that this persecution of Buddhists by the Catholics and by the president Diem, the Catholic president, it was just gone too much, and they had to take a stand. So, likewise, Jan Palach would have said that he felt he had to take a stand. I mean, what is it about his chart? He has Mercury conjunct the Sun. I know lots of people have Mercury conjunct the Sun, but we've talked about combustion. But he does have Mercury conjunct the Sun. Unfortunately, we could take that very literally. He also has a Mars-Neptune conjunction. How is where does he put his energy? There could be a certain sense of distraction there. I'm not. I don't think it's for me to say that self-immolation is a good thing. I mean, I know that he's celebrated as a hero in Czech Republic and beyond, and I absolutely understand why he did what he did, but I don't think one should say he did the right thing. I don't think one can say that. I mean, particularly if you take a sort of Christian perspective and with one's views on suicide and so forth. But he has the Mars Neptune conjunct, and he has Moon in Scorpio conjunct the South Node, and that Moon in Scorpio conjunct the South Node. That makes me think that for him he did the wrong thing. If you think about it, there's that legend about about scorpions, isn't there? That if you surround a scorpion with a ring of petrol, it will sting itself to death. It also reminds me of Aleister Crowley's view of Scorpio, that there are 3 levels of Scorpio. There's the eagle, the snake, and the scorpion. The eagle, would be soaring above everything, fresh air, space. The snake hiding under a rock. Then you've got the scorpion stinging itself to death. And on the Crowley tarot card for death, if you look at if I haven't looked at that tarot card for a long time, but the death card in Crowley's pack, you will see there is an eagle and there is a snake and there is a scorpion. And so I think with Moon and Scorpio conjunct the South Node is the past, where we have come from, where we have come from, where we should be moving away from. If you've got Moon in Scorpio conjunct the South Node, I know he's celebrated. I understand why he did what he did. But I believe that for him, it was the wrong thing to do. Simply because he's got, the Moon is basically, how you're using your feelings, where your feelings are going, inappropriate response to one's feelings. And I think the self-destructiveness of that Moon conjunct South Node, even though he is responding to something that was completely unreasonable. I mean, it's absolutely understandable. But I think when you're dealing with the South Node, I think there is a sense in which you can say something is right or wrong. I think that's perhaps a one point in astrology that there are a sense of right or wrong. And given what he did, I don't think it was the right thing to do for him. And here is the I think I've got his this is the chart for when he set himself on fire. So he did this on January the 16th, 1969, at January 16th, 1969 at 2:30 p.m. So let's compare that. Let's put Jan Palach in the middle, and we will put the immolation on the outside. So it is quite dramatic. The 2 of the transits that he had when he set himself on fire. Mars, when he did it, was at 9:53 Scorpio. So Mars was exactly on his, pretty much, okay, it was 1 degree off, but it was pretty close to his Moon conjunct the South Node in Scorpio. And I think that really does tell us that the real thing in his chart that shows us that he made this decision to set himself on fire was his Moon conjunct the South Node in Scorpio. In a Via Combusta, of course. I mean, I don't normally look at the Moon in a Via Combusta in natal charts, but it's something to consider, and he does have it, doing something unexpected, his feelings moving him in unexpected ways, and so Mars hits his Moon's conjunct South Node, and that's pretty much when he immolated himself. And then look at Pluto. Pluto was at 25 Virgo, and we've got an exact time, 3:27 a.m. So his IC was at 25:13 Virgo, and so when Pluto was conjunct his IC, that was when he did it. So 2 really very important transits there. So that is Jan Palach. Then we had another self-immolation, perhaps the self-immolation which had the biggest impact in terms, if you look at self-immolations, one that really was dramatic, and that was the self-immolation of Mohamed Bouazizi. Now, here's the horoscope of Mohamed Bouazizi. Oh, one thing I do want you to point out about Jan Palach's self-immolation. There was a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. I know it was... it wasn't exact, but we have South Node Jupiter-Uranus. Jupiter-Uranus is about the principle of wanting freedom. And I know, I said it's not an exact conjunction, but, this was 1969, the late 60s, wanting freedom. It was a very, very 60s conjunction. And that he perhaps was somehow influenced by that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And you'll notice at the exact time of that time of the immolation, Moon was exactly on the descendant. And so the descendant, I don't know whether that 230 seems approximate, but I think that was at 230. So, but the Moon was around 230. The Moon was sort of on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, and the descendant was on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. This was about freedom. He wanted freedom. It was an action that was designed to be about freedom, because that's what Jupiter-Uranus is about. But do remember that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So Mohamed Bouazizi was not a political activist. He was he was just trying to make money for himself and his family by selling things in a tough economic climate in Tunisia. We don't have a time of birth for him, and he kept having to, he kept trying to buy stuff to sell, and he got his stuff confiscated. He got his barrow confiscated. And it just became just all too much for him. How is he supposed to make a living? And he has a sun in Aries, Mars in Scorpio. This is someone who is, I suppose, sun in Aries. I don't have a time of birth, but I suppose someone who is quite assertive up to a point. He'd perhaps snaps. That Aries has to take action, and that Aries Sun square Jupiter. There comes a point where he has to, where he feels he has to do something about it. And so, at the beginning of January 2011, he snaps. And he sets himself on fire. And this is the chart. Now, when we looked at Palach's, but January the 16th, 1969, we saw that there was a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. There was an exact Jupiter-Uranus conjunction when Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire. On January the 4th, 2011. I think I've set this for Tunis. I think it happened in a suburb of Tunis, but it's really close. So there is an exact Jupiter-Uranus conjunction at 2702 Pisces. Exact. And so it's just interesting we have a double Jupiter-Uranus theme with Jan Palach and Mohamed Bouazizi's self-immolations. And it happened just after a new moon, and this was the beginning of the Arab Spring. It happened at that moment. There was a new moon at 13 and a half Capricorn. That new moon, interestingly, exactly opposition the US's sun. The sun, because the US has its sun at 13 and a half Cancer, and as we know, the United States did everything they could to manipulate the Arab Spring to their purposes. They facilitated the fall of Gaddafi. They got involved in Syria. So America's fingers might be kind of all over the place there. Okay, not all over the place, but Neptune the US's moon is at, I think, about 27 Aquarius, and Neptune was on the US's moon at the time of the Arab Spring. Neptune is about confusion, delusion. Do they know what they're doing? All Obama's hope about what can be achieved, plus the Sun opposition, the US's Sun, and the Arab Spring was basically a disaster, except for Tunisia. Actually, Tunisia did, actually, I don't know what the situation is like, but for a long time it was one of the only democracy in the Arab world, pretty much. That is a tragedy, that the Arab Spring just made things even worse in the end, and it wasn't helped by America just coming in thinking, oh yeah, we'll get rid of Gaddafi, we'll do some regime change in Syria, regime change in Egypt even. I don't think America was particularly behind that. That didn't work out very well. So it didn't work out, but America didn't help, did it? Anyway, this is the chart for this self-immolation just before the new moon. I just want to sort of quickly see what was. So that's Mohamed Bouazizi's chart in the middle, and the Arabs, the Arab Spring, the time when he set himself on fire on the outer wheel. I suppose we could say that the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction was sort of trine his Mars. He had Venus conjunct his Mars. I don't know if that really fits a sort of self-immolation. But the midheaven, assuming we've got a right timing, the North Node was on the midheaven, which was conjunct his Neptune. So perhaps he was picking up on that a bit. I don't know. I mean, we don't see the dramatic transits here with the Arab when he for Mohamed Bouazizi when he set himself on fire. I mean, it doesn't help by the fact we don't have, at least I don't have, a time of birth for him. But I think what is most impressive about the Arab Spring is the fact that we have an exact Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and there's the idea here that we're dealing with something that is collective, and somehow it was him that the collective hit. It was him that decided to voice what was going on in the collective with that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And finally, I want to look at the horoscope of Aaron Bushnell. Now, the thing is, with Aaron Bushnell, I don't know when he's born. So how do I look at his horoscope? Okay, well, let's start by looking at the immolation. This is when he set himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy. You can, I mean, you've got Moon trine Uranus, pretty close. The Moon is fairly close to being on the IC. So I think that sort of fits, sort of a dramatic event, Moon trine Uranus. Now, I've been talking a lot about Mars square Jupiter. That when you've got Mars square Jupiter, that encourages extreme action, being overly energetic, having an idea and just pushing it all the way. So I suppose you could say, well, that fits with Mars square Jupiter. What else? I suppose you've got you've got Saturn. Well, no, Saturn's not that close to the midheaven. I mean, I don't think the chart in itself is especially dramatic, and we're not helped by the fact that we don't really know his time of birth. We don't even know his date of birth. We don't even know his month of birth. But nonetheless, I am still going to try to look at his horoscope, even though I don't know anything about his birth. I do know he's born in 1998. So let's look at his chart. This is set for July the 1st, 1998 at noon. Now, I don't know when he's born, so we need to basically cut some stuff out, because there's, talking about the moon and the sun, and let's make a few changes to this. We don't know. Let's take the sun soon. We're going to take out a load of planets here. We don't need to know about Chiron. We don't need. We won't bother with the nodes. Don't need to know about the part of fortune. We removed everything. We don't need the. Okay, there we go. That's looking better. We'll put Chiron in, because we'll leave Chiron there, because Chiron is a slow mover. So that's all we know about his chart. That's it. His Neptune may have been in Capricorn, may have been in Aquarius. His Neptune was at approximately the beginning of Aquarius. He had Pluto at 5 Sagittarius, Uranus at 11 Aquarius. So these planets, this is going to be roughly what the situation was in 1998. So he is an example of a particular generation. And this tells us something about the generation that he's coming from. People, well, in his case, I think he was 25 when he set himself on fire. Neptune at 1 Aquarius. So Pluto was going over his Neptune. So let's translate that. Here you have a generation of people born in 1998 with their Neptunes at around 0 Aquarius. So Pluto transits the Neptune of this generation. All these people born around this time, Pluto goes over their Neptune. Now, most of those people, all of those people, pretty much are not going to be affected by that Pluto on this Neptune. But there's always one person, isn't there? And this is the one person. He's a representative of his generation. And so with Pluto conjunct his Neptune, Neptune is, I suppose, Neptune in Aquarius, perhaps. We don't know whether his Neptune is in Aquarius. His Neptune is probably in Aquarius. It could be in Capricorn. But that Neptune is, the desire to, I suppose, to transcend, to be part of something else. We all have a Neptune in our chart. But Pluto in late Capricorn, early Sagittarius, is going to be conjunct the Neptune of people born around 1998. And so this is part of the thing going on with him. That is why I think he felt that he had to do what he did. We perhaps shouldn't see it as the action of an individual. Controversial thing there. We should perhaps see it as the action of a representative of his generation, of Pluto going over his Neptune. So that might be part of how we should see it. And with this, there was a Jupiter at the time of the immolation. Jupiter, there was Mars Jupiter. There was a Mars Jupiter square. So there was a Mars Jupiter square. So now that I have just demonstrated to you that I'm only looking at 3 or 4 planets, I can start putting the planets back. Oh, if you're into Chiron conjunct Scorpio, again a generational thing. When we looked at Jan Palach's chart, remember he had moon at around a moon conjunct South Node at 8 Scorpio. I did associate Scorpio with there is a self-destructive energy to Scorpio. When you can't do anything, you sting yourself to death. So it may be that Chiron, in a completely generational perspective, Chiron and Scorpio is about there being a wound and one sacrificing oneself in a very self-destructive kind of way in order to deal with, obviously it's self-destructive, of course, by definition. But Chiron and Scorpio may be about the self-inflicted wound. that that generation feels, people born in the late 90s. And the vast majority of them, it'll just be a generational thing. It'll have nothing to do with them. But for him, it appears to be personal. And it seems that Uranus is going to be square Chiron. We don't know exactly what the orb is going to be, but for this generation, Uranus is square Chiron. I don't know what orb, and he seems to be demonstrating this. Chiron in Scorpio is the self-inflicted wound in response to something that he doesn't feel he can change, and Uranus is that dramatic event, which he does, so he's that representative of his generation, he's the one who sets himself on fire for his generation, for people born around there. Now, I am not saying it's a positive thing to do. In fact, I am not saying it's a positive thing to do. I'm sorry, I don't think myself, maybe you disagree with me, but I don't think this is a valid form of protest. That's just my view. But whatever you think of the situation in Gaza, so let me just put the planets back. Okay, I'll put the North Node back. I'll put the South Node back, and all the other planets. So now you know how I'm approaching it. We can now go back to doing looking at how whether or not the immolation chart. So outside the Israeli embassy was affecting his Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, whatever. There you see. So if his Chiron was around 12 Scorpio, there you can see we had this. There was a Venus-Mars conjunction at the time of the immolation, which was kind of on his Uranus. We don't know exactly where his Uranus is, but Uranus is a fairly slow mover, so it will be a few degrees apart from there. It won't be that far. It will definitely be in that part of Aquarius, and so from a generational perspective, it doesn't matter if the orbs are a bit out. Because we're looking at his chart from a generational perspective. I know that his birthday is probably out by now, but I kind of wanted to go through the exercise of trying to look at someone's chart if we don't know their date of birth. That was a sort of an extra sort of motivation for looking at his chart, from looking at a chart just not only knowing the year. So yeah, you can see that Venus-Mars was conjunct his Aquarius. Conjunct his Uranus. There's Jupiter. You see, there's our Jupiter square Mars hitting Uranus, potentially hitting his Chiron. So yeah, I kind of think that sort of fits quite well in terms of trying to understand that generation. And I think that Aaron Bushnell was in a sense a representative of his generation, and so I think we can make some sense of his astrology, even though we only know that he was born in 1998. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for today. Obviously, I hope you found that of some interest. Sorry if the topic of this video is a bit gruesome, but it piqued my interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would of course be grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you enjoyed the video, I would of course be grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.